Welcome back to the Brandon T. Adams audio experience. We're sitting here with Valarie Troya. She has a community. She is a speaker. She is doing training around Nashville and also other parts of the country. I'm excited to jump into your story, how you got started going to the Navy, what you're doing today. We're gonna go through all of it. So
Awesome.
Just to start out, why did you want to join the Navy? What was like your burning desire or inspiration to be a part of the Navy?
So, interesting story. My dad came to this country when he was 17 and he joined the Navy. And I was the rebel without a cause. He was like, you need to go to college. And I said, I just want to be in a rock and roll band. And
rock and roll, I love it.
I was working for a record label at that time. And so I joined my ROTC unit in my high school. They actually gave me a scholarship to go to college. So I used my scholarship to go to college, and that's what got me into the Navy.
Yeah.
And it was just been a wild ride.
How old were you?
I was 18.
So at 18, you said, I want to join the Navy.
I did, yeah. I signed my enlistment papers right out of high school, and then it's spent 12 years serving in the Navy.
Okay, so for somebody that hasn't joined the Navy or service, can you explain from the moment you signed those papers, what was the first 1 to 2 years like? What did you all do for your training? What was that process?
So they allowed me to go to school. So while I was in the Navy, I went to college, and the deal was while I was at school, I did school things. We did training during the week, and then during the summer times I went active duty. So that's when I was on ships doing different trainings, did a lot of my qualifications during that time. And then when I graduated, that's when I went full on active duty, no more reserve time. And
how many years in was that when you went active duty? You were how old at that time?
I was 22.
Okay, so 4 years in, and then at 22 you did active duty.
I did active duty for almost 5 years, and then I transitioned back to reserves for another 4 years.
Okay, so for somebody that doesn't really, you think of the Navy, you think of the Army, what's one thing that most people would never expect when you join the Navy? What's one thing that you've done that most people would never even think of?
I fought pirates. That's my claim to fame, is that I wasn't expecting, you think you're going to be on ships and go on. I've been to amazing, incredible places. And
what are a few? What's your?
I've been to Petra. I've been to Dubai, UAE, Australia, Japan, Turkey, Spain, Italy, different parts of the U.S. Just been everywhere. But you would not expect that. I was in when there was the time of war. There was still the global war of terrorism was going on. So we had different missions that we were part of. But I was not expecting to get shot at by pirates. That was not in my fine print. Yeah. But it was quite the experience. But I really did learn so many great lessons, and I would never regret that time. It was a part of me, and I'm so glad that I did it. And
if you were going to think, because I do want to talk about getting shot at by pirates, and you have a crazy story, but before we jump into that, what would be if you were going to pinpoint 3 things you learned from your service that you apply to your life today? What are those 3 lessons or things that you learned?
Semper Gumby, which means Semper Gumby. You know Gumby, the guy that from the 1950s that showed the little green guy, stretchy Gumby.
Oh yeah.
So we had a phrase in the Navy. We have lots of phrases and lots of procedures. Everything has a checklist, but Semper Gumby was one of them, and it means always flexible, because the plan of the day is never the plan of the day, and you just don't know what to expect. But
sounds like entrepreneurship.
Exactly. That's why I kind of dwelled into it, but. You have to be able to remain positive and keep going, because if you get stuck in this rut, you're dealing with life or death matters, and you don't have the ability to say woe is me, or become negative about it, or become a victim. It's not an option when people's lives are on the line. So being really flexible and going with all the punches, literally the flow and the ebbs of life in the Navy, you have to accept it. And so being always flexible is one thing. I learned what not to be as a leader. The military is a very controlling environment, and like I mentioned, I was a rebel without a cause. I will always go against the grain. But for me, I learned some amazing things about leadership, and one of them was my mentor. He said, "Val," he's like, "does this problem help us solve the war?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, if I was feuding with my roommate, he said, think of the bigger picture. He's like, is this really important at the end of the day? Is it going to help us solve the problem? And that's just a simple question like, is this going to help us win the war? This one little incident.
It's really good.
And it's interesting because I kept it throughout when I was in corporate business and now when I'm in my own entrepreneurial journey. Is this little problem, is it that significant? Is it going to help us win the war? Or is it just something I can let go? And that has made a significant impact in how I operate in my life and how I choose to help people when I'm coaching them.
I think about that. We talked before in life and business, there's a lot of obstacles, and I always say, at the end of the day, it's life and death. If not, it's not that big a deal. I think
Exactly,
same as like,
yeah.
is it gonna? A lot of things we get so worked up in our mind that it becomes a bigger thing than what it really is.
Oh, truly. And we get so stuck in having our human experiences that we forget that we can either use this to progress forward or we can use it to set ourselves back. Mm-hmm. And it's a really big distinction you have to make. And so that was another lesson. And
What's the third one?
The third one is life is too short to give a fuck.
That's good. Life is too short to give a fuck. I love that one.
So for me, like, I try to remain positive because life is so short and all you have is what you put out into the world. And are you creating wonderful experiences for all of the people that you meet? What is your legacy? Like, is it to impress the people around you or is it to live true in your purpose? And to live true in your purpose, you need to not give a fuck. Because you can't let those outside influences dictate your mood, dictate your emotional experiences, how you show up in the world. It affects your relationships, your business, your friendships, anything you have. It all bleeds into each other. So not giving a fuck and keeping positive.
So being flexible. Will this win the war?
Will this win the war?
And not give a fuck.
Not give a fuck.
Those are three good ones.
The Navy is not really soft on their expressions, but that's a...
So we met through a mutual friend, Justin, who was a gunner in the Navy, and pirate hunter, I think he goes by, right?
Yeah, because he's the one that actually shot the pirates on the ship.
Yeah.
Out of our 50 millimeter cannon. So he's the one that pulled the trigger, which was just phenomenal. And so we've known each other for, goodness, 15 years now.
Oh, wow.
And it was so funny that now when we first knew each other, I was 22. I think we're around the same age. He was maybe a year younger, but I was his boss. And he'd been in the Navy for, around the same time, but I was his boss. And now all of a sudden, like, full circle, we've had such a great relationship. That's a cool thing about the Navy is you have these long-standing relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you go to war together, your outlook on life is totally different. You're there, thick and thin. So.
I remember, I won't say exactly what he said about you. It was a good thing. When he reached out to me, he's like, hey, you need to work with this girl, and somewhere along the lines, she could hurt you in many different ways if she wanted to. And I thought, this is interesting. Okay, let's hear who this is. This Valarie person. But I had known him for like 5 years through, social media or whatnot. But then we got connected. But there's a cool story you have. I don't want to say cool, interesting story. I'd love for you to share the story how you were on the ship one night and then you woke up to being fired upon.
Yeah, it's wild. So in the Navy, you stand rotationary watches on the bridge. That's kind of the highest point of the ship where there are windows. You're looking out, you can see the ocean ahead. And one of my roles, I was the officer of the deck, which means I was managing all the people that had roles. I just got done with my rotationary shift. It was about 2 a.m. So I go down to my room, which was the size of a hallway. I mean, I shared it with 3 people. It was not a cruise liner. It was full on metal. Gray haze to the way.
Yeah.
But I remember going to bed and my roommate relieved me, and an hour and a half later I woke up to gunshots like right next to my head because that's where my bedroom was, and I heard ting, 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 ting. I'm like, what is that? It's 5 a.m. All of a sudden the cannon above my head, that's where the 50 millimeter was, that went off, and I'm like, this is way too early for an evolution. And our new captain, who had been there for 12 hours, he had just taken over the ship.
That's crazy.
And he said, this is the captain. I need everyone inside of the skin of the ship. We are being attacked. And I said, what? Like, I'm disoriented. I'm tired. And I get out of my room and I meet my my manager, and she said, and I'm like, what do I do? She said, because I was part of the boat crew in one of my other roles. And she said, Val, you're the only legal person here. You do that.
Yeah.
I said, where to the boat? She's like, you're not going on the fucking boats, Val. Do your legal thing. And I'm just like, this is not in my training.
Yeah.
This is not what I went to no one talked about pirates. This is never.
This is where you be flexible, right?
Yeah, and because this has never happened, literally never happened to the U.S. Navy before, and there was no training. We went into River City, which was they shut down all communications. So my JAG that I worked with, I couldn't talk to him, and so I remember going down to the office that I shared with one of my workers, and he handed me the detainee handbook, and he said, "You went to college. Read this. I'll be back in a little bit." I said, I've never seen any of these things. I've been in the Navy, as I make a joke, like my ensign bars were still dripping wet because I'd been in the Navy for 5 minutes, it seemed like. And, you weren't expecting that. I mean, this is just not something that you wake up every day preparing for war, although it's a possibility. It just kind of happened. And I was really quick on my feet to just realize that there's different rules of engagement when it comes to war, and not a lot of people understand that. And we had to be very careful about what we did. Every step was going to be put under a spotlight, and it was imperative that we are now setting precedent. And I knew that.
When you say spotlight, like the news, the
president, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Navy, everyone is going to come in and try to give their opinions on what happened, because this is a lesson learned. We need to understand everything about it so it doesn't happen again. That's how we don't repeat history. And it has never happened since this date. But there was a lot of lessons learned, and I had to quickly think on my feet under pressure. I mean, that's one of the biggest things the Navy has given to me. The gift was able to be in that pressure cooker and make the best decisions you can. And that was the wildest day. I remember telling people that had outranked me, had been in years in the Navy, putting them in their place to make sure that these, when we took the pirates on board, we needed to treat them humanely. That's incredibly important for the way the U.S. military operates.
Even though they were just shooting at you previously, trying to kill you.
Yeah, they woke me up from the glorious sounds of gunshots. At that point, once we disabled the fight, we needed to take care of them and make sure that they were not, first aid, make sure they were able to survive this and get them so we gave them medical care, and then we were able to ship them off to brigs and get them extradited back to the U.S. so we can then charge them with crimes. So it's a whole process, but when testosterone is going, I mean, I was on a ship of, 40 women and 600 guys. It was the testosterone, you can cut it with a knife. It was so strong because this was intense. No one expects to be woken up in the middle of the ocean being shot at. It just has not happened.
It's an experience a lot of people haven't had, so they're all trying to navigate it with anger, emotions, and you got to stay contained.
When you're in the middle of it's the most surreal experience to be in a hostile, violent attack, and not many people have gone there, and I'm so thankful for it. And that's the gift that has been given to me, to be able to now, what I do in my business, to be able to say, hey, women, primarily speak to women, you don't need to experience this trauma that I did for you to get it, for you to protect yourself. I'm going to just give you the lessons I've learned, and I'm going to impress upon you the gravity of the situation so you can really make the correct choices for your life to protect yourself.
So picture this. I'm Valarie right now. I wake up to being shot at. And can you explain what are the things going through my mind, and maybe not even related, maybe it's personal things, what is going through your brain? What are the voices you're saying to yourself? What are you saying in that moment? Give us a little glimpse.
So I have no windows, right? I had a very tiny room, and it was thin metal, and there's no windows. You have no idea what's going on. You're disoriented. And imagine waking up, someone wakes you up in the middle of your sleep. You're in the middle of your REM sleep, but the first thought was is this the day I'm going to die? Mm-hmm. And I never felt that way ever in my life since that point, but that was the scariest day. Is this my last day on Earth? Mm-hmm. Is it? Am I ever going to go back home?
That's powerful.
And that's probably the scariest thing I've ever. I've been some crazy experiences, but that is the one that I'm is this the day I die? Is this it?
What was your next thought after that then?
And then it was when I went to saw my manager, she's like, you're the legal person. I'm like, you just got to get into action. It was no more about me. It was, now I need to protect the rest of the people on this ship.
Did it feel like superhuman powers almost?
I felt like it was like an out-of-body experience. I don't know what spirit came into me that day, but for whatever reason, it was very calculated. There was just movement. It was in a matter of hours, the amount of things that had to happen with no instruction, with just common sense, a little bit of training, and just a little bit of grit and resilience. You just got to go through it, and you figure it out. Everything is figure outable.
So what was, from the moment you woke up to the moment, okay, the bad guys are contained in that, was it hour time frame, 30 minutes, 2 hours? Like
Probably about 5 hours.
So 5 hours of tense alertness.
Oh, the adrenaline is running.
I bet you didn't sleep for at least a day.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, once we got them on the secured and got the medical attention, we had to connect with another ship. Then we got them over to a ship that had a bigger brig, and then they got extradited. But that took about 2.5 years. Like, once that immediate adrenaline wore off, then there was, let's backtrack. We need to know exactly what happened. There's collection of evidence. I collected so many cell phones. Our whole office was filled with cell phones because none of that could get out. It had to be, you had to secure everything. What needs to be presented to the world is what story you wanted to say.
So what happened? So you look at, after that experience happened, you look at that, probably back in it all the time. How do you relate that to what you do today in business?
Oh man, it's interesting. I was in corporate for almost a decade, in corporate businesses in the realm of HR, and how corporate businesses operate. It's so silly to me. The problems that they think are problems aren't really problems. I'm like, but did someone die? Did someone die today, or are they gonna die? Because if it's not, it can be a tomorrow problem.
Yeah.
And so
a tomorrow problem. I like that.
And I think how I operate my business, you really do need to roll with the punches. You can't expect things to go the way that they will, but there's always a way to solve the problem. Just take a moment, take a step back, breathe, because that's what happened in that moment. I was like, all right, I'm alive. People are alive. We've contained the shooting. Now let's figure out the solution. And you have to be brave enough to just realize that you don't have all the answers, but they will come to you. Just be smart. If you can take a moment to calm your energy down, you can see the path through the fog. And so in my business, especially when you're an entrepreneur, there's no guidebook. I have a business that has not been created before. And so there was no previous examples I could look upon to replicate. I had to really, with the guidance of great people like yourself, there's other people that can come in and help give those little nuggets. And if you can take a moment to think and strategize, everything, that's what I really take into my business. Like, how can I get through this? How can I continue growing? How can I progress forward? Everything's figure outable. Just take a moment, breathe. It's not going to explode. And even if it does explode, it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll just rebuild from that rubble.
How do you, so looking at what you do today, you're helping people, you're training them, you're helping them prepare for what could happen, protecting themselves, safety. What made you want to get specifically into that line of work? Because you're doing public speaking, you're doing the in-person training, you have a membership program. What made you want to get into that? I mean, yes, you had your experience in the Navy, but this very specifically, what inspired that?
So I have 3 children now. At that time, I was working as an HR person. I was a consultant, and my older son, he's special needs, so we go to therapy every morning, and so that's part of my routine is going to bring him to therapy and getting some Starbucks because I need my coffee. I rely on it. And I live in a very secluded and well-to-do town. And so there's not a lot of crime, but something did happen on a really particular day that shook me up. And there's a woman that was carjacked, and she was assaulted outside of the Starbucks that I go to. And she was, not only that, she was dragged from her car 500 feet. And this doesn't happen. I mean, this is a very, I live in a town where celebrities live. Like, this just doesn't happen. And I thought to myself, we're in a really vulnerable state, just in the world, but even in this particular area, people leave their doors unlocked. They are really casual with the way they go about safety. And so I decided that at that moment I was pregnant. And I said, if someone wanted to kidnap us, they absolutely could. Like, I was in my most vulnerable state. Like, I'm not a big person, but also when you're pregnant, you really don't have a lot of defenses. I can't run, and I can't leave my special needs child. And I said, how can I protect myself? And places like that were available, my now competitors, they weren't focused on people like me. I like sparkly things. I spent many years in camo, and I don't want to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. And there just wasn't a market for someone like me. And so I created a company to solve my own need. And as I started selling, started with products, and I didn't realize amount of information that I
What kind
was
of products? Give examples.
So concealed carry clothing, holsters, especially when you're concealing as a woman, our clothing is made where it's skin tight. And a lot of women have a lot of insecurities, body insecurities more specifically. And so the clothing, when you go try it on, printing is huge if you want to conceal carry. And women's clothing are just, it's hard. I wanted to make a place where I've already vetted these products. You can just buy them and conceal carry in your professional environment or casual environment, whatever you wanted. I wanted to help women in that area. So it started off with products, and then it turned into courses. I'm naive. I've been doing personal safety since 2005. I was a bouncer before I joined the Navy.
Nice.
So I've been doing...
Trying to visualize this one.
I was probably 100 pounds, like a little chihuahua, barking at people as a bouncer. So I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And the things that I know and the experience I've had in my professional side, but also personally, things that have happened to me, all these lessons I take for granted that not every woman is taught those things. Majority of women are not taught those things. And I didn't want women to feel unsafe. I wanted to create a place where they can ask questions and learn without being intimidated, without being judged. And so it started off with products and led into courses and led into books and led into speaking engagements and led into lessons. It's just grown dramatically.
So think about, let's speak to women or really anybody out there, what are a few things they don't think about when they go out and about in the public, like the whole situational awareness or how they protect themselves? What are a few tips you can give people that they don't even think about that they can do to protect themselves when out in the public?
The one thing I think about is when I tell people, give yourself time and opportunities. And how you're going to do that is by creating barriers, right? So I believe weapons are another barrier. They're just an opportunity to give you time. But situational awareness is huge, but that's a huge term, right? What is situational awareness?
Mm-hmm.
What does it really mean specifically? For me, and what I teach people in my classes is create a bubble. You cannot have situational awareness, and I certainly don't want you to go walking around high alert. It's exhausting, but you just can't prepare for everything, knowing and seeing everything.
What do you mean by a bubble? Give an example.
So my bubble would be everything around you. If you have like a bubble boy, 10 feet is your parameter. That's the most dangerous part about. People can come and physically attack you with a weapon within 10 feet. If you have children, expand it out to 15 feet. But in that 10 feet, you need to know everything that's happening. Who's in that bubble? What's in that bubble? What is occurring in that bubble? That's what you can control. And if you feel uncomfortable, you trust your gut and really believe in your intuition. But in that bubble, if you don't feel safe, make a larger bubble. Remove yourself from that bubble. Put barriers. Use your voice. If someone's making you uncomfortable, verbally command them to get away from you. And if they don't get away from you, you have a weapon, whether it's your body, a non-lethal or a semi-lethal, and that's, or not semi-lethal, a lethal one. That's your last resort. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about in your realm, keeping mindful of your bubble, mm-hmm. giving yourself the ability for time, right? I want to be, if I know if we're in a room here, there's a door over there, if someone walks in, I know in this bubble, how am I going to react? I can't tell in that room next to us, that's 50 feet away, it's not relevant to me in this immediate area because I can't affect what happens over there. I can respond and I can make strategies, but in my bubble, that's the most thing that I care about.
Well, I think about when we came in here today, this room right here, you said, I can't remember what you said, but I think you walked around to check out what the kind of location was.
I needed to know where the exits are, and I think when you go through your day, and I tell women all the time, have different levels of awareness. In your home, you should be your most relaxed, right? You should be kicking up your feet, having some wine, whatever. But you also have barriers there. Locks on your doors, a security system, activate those. It's a simple thing. I'm all about simple. So if you can lock your door, lock it. Close your garage door, set your alarm. Simple things to just create barriers you can relax.
If somebody came in, so like off the cuff, but somebody came in this room right now, or just you and I, and had a gun, what would your first, what would you do?
If someone came through that door, because there's a door right over there, the first thing I would do, I need to know where. I would get up and I'd probably flip this chair over to make a barrier. I'm making barriers because if they did have a gun, this is probably not the best thing, but this is probably thicker because you have some wood here. But I'd create a barrier and then I obviously have a weapon on me. Mm-hmm. So I would try to get some time. Maybe I'll let them unload some bullets, but I'm going to have some cover and I'm going to respond with a weapon or my phone, get some additional help. But I'm going to go in and fight for my life.
We talk about this.
I'd probably push you over, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I'm much bigger than I am, but I'm just gonna push you over and put the chair over.
What are we friends?
This table is going on, everything's flying. I'm gonna use that chest.
Well, I think,
can.
we talked about this before, like, I don't know why I think about this all the time, but anytime I go somewhere, I do make sure my back is against the wall, I can see the entrance, but then I put myself in scenarios, what do I have in my hand? Can I throw something at their face to distract them? Can I think through all these different scenarios, but I also have weapons that I not carry with me in my home. I have to protect myself, sometimes traveling, guns, but you just don't know.
You just don't know, and I think when I tell people, I don't do self-defense, and there's a very different delineation from self-defense and personal safety. Self-defense is your reactionary type of defense, so that is thinking of striking, chokeholds. These things are promoted to women, and I think that they give them a false sense of competency, because to be proficient in that, you need to do at least 40 months consistently.
Yeah.
That's not in the fine print. It's not going to tell you in the fine print. They're going to give you one class and you feel like you can take down a bad guy, which it's not realistic. That's not how the body operates if you've ever been in a violent attack or a hostile environment, which most women haven't. And they leave there thinking that they can fight some dude, and that's not actually what's going to happen. So what I do is I help them do the proactive side. I'm going to give them little simple things, because I know that most people won't follow through.
What are two or three simple things? Just
locking your doors, right? Set a routine that's part of your habit. That when you go in, use those tools. They're just tools. Locks are tools. Cameras are tools. Your Ring doorbell's a tool. Use them.
What about somebody on the street? You're walking down the street and somebody attacks you.
But that's the bubble. That's another thing.
Bubble.
The bubble. So I'll give you an instance or an example. I was walking down, we live in Nashville, I was walking down the street, and I know it's in my bubble. I was walking to my car alone. I usually travel alone, which people find scary, and they're like, how? You're a woman. I'm like, I know, but I'm also packing, so we're good here. But I'm also aware. So this man tried to enter my bubble. I was aware. I knew by his body language. I'm observing these things and realizing that my intuition is saying this is not a good encounter. And he was saying some kind of cat call. I don't know exactly what he was saying, but it was a cat call kind of phrase. And then he tried to grab my arm. And before I even got him trying to touch me, I immediately responded with my verbal commands. I was prepared for it. And I said, not today. And I put my hand up, and he's like, he wasn't expecting this from a person in a pencil skirt that was walking, briskly walking.
You said about the power of no, too.
Power of no, and I teach women, these are simple things, but I was aware it was in my bubble. My bubble is a huge thing that I carry with me, or simple things, in your parking garage. Park backwards. These are simple techniques, like parking backwards, because when you get into your car, you're looking forwards. Like you mentioned, you like having your back towards a wall. When you're in a parking garage, your back is to a wall. There's no one really behind you. No one can come up behind you. I've seen people send me videos. They're like, look at this person was carjacked. You know what they were doing when they got into their car? Instead of pressing the lock button, they sat there and they looked on their phone. Or they were doing something. It's a simple technique to park backwards. Lock your door. Use these tools. They can save you more times than you think. And they're simple changes. It's just creating a good habit of mindset.
Okay, so before we wrap this, I do want to go, I love shooting guns. It's a little side note.
You do?
I love target practicing. What is your gun of choice? For handgun?
So, I'm a little biased because I am a dealer for Kimber. However, my favorite gun that I ever got, my first gun was a Glock. So I am partial
Same
to
here.
Glocks.
Glock. Well, actually, my first one, I was 16. This is a 16-year-old birthday gift you don't give, but it was a 22 handgun. But then my first real memorable gun was a Glock 40 extended barrel.
Oh, wow.
That my father gave me, which I have to this day.
That's amazing.
Have it next to my bed. If you're wondering.
So it was a unique experience. I just got back from my deployment, and I was in Virginia. They had a Glock store, and so I went up, took the elevator to the Glock store. It was like going into Tiffany's. It was such an experience. It was wild. I go in there, it's a beautiful experience, the Glock store, and there's just two gentlemen there, and they're like, how can we help you? And I'm like, this is so nice. I feel like I'm buying a very expensive thing, and they helped me out. I got my Glock 19. It was, I had nothing on my background, so it took like 30 seconds, and walked out with my gun. And then I Cerakoted it to be a Louis Vuitton print. And of course, my range bag is a Louis Vuitton bag because I'm bougie. But that's like my favorite gun. I love
Do you have any, beyond handguns, do you have any long rifles?
So I have my AR-15, which
Is it 223?
it does, and it's
Same here, mine are 223.
it's covered in roses. And
Really?
Yeah.
It's a pink one.
It is a rose gold color, but it has roses on it, and it's very feminine looking. My guns are very feminine. So
My two, I have one that's a Bushmaster, and if we're talking guns, I've had for a while. I mean, I've been shooting it for 12 years.
Wow.
And then I have one called Bob Keller Signature Edition. Shout out to Bob Keller, which is a very light one. He says if he was going to go into a gunfight, he would have this gun, and it's pop-up red dot red dot scope, and it's so light.
Wow.
And then the stock comes out. But these are guns I love target shooting, but I love having the confidence of knowing if the worst case scenario does come, that I at least have the ability to protect myself. I'm not like somebody that's like, oh, I'm going to carry my gun everywhere, but I do have the ability to know the peace of mind that I can protect my family.
Absolutely, and that's how I also think about these things. Like, I'm a single mom, and of course I believe the police are there to help, but there's a response time that, what are you going to do for 5 minutes? And so I don't have another person to rely on, so it's just me to defend me and my children. And so my way of thinking is, I'm going to do what I need to do, and I need to practice. I only use iron sights, by the way.
Nice.
I do not. I mean, I have a scope for the AR, but
See, my AR
I love,
scope, yeah.
like, I don't use lasers. Me and my good old iron sights.
I like it. I mean, at
And
the end
I'm
of the
dead
day,
on center. I mean, I'm so.
I mean, most cases, though, you think about it, if you ever had to, for protecting yourself, it's close range. It's not like you're going to do a long, you see in the movies.
Well, there's a difference between what really qualifies as self-defense and what doesn't. So that's why I like using my iron sights, because I know that I'm practicing for that level of self-defense, because if it comes down to it, that's what I need to know. But there's some days I don't carry my firearm all the time. I mean, usually I have some kind of non-lethal on me, or lethal weapon, just my knife. I love that thing. So.
Hey, by the way, if you check out, what's your social media handle for everybody? For Instagram?
So my personal one is at Valarie Troya.
So you got to check out her profile, because she does these videos when she goes out and about. She gives different scenarios of, hey, here's my weapon of choice today. Here's what I'm going to wear. And I love it. It's so good.
I made a reel about going out to dinner. So I was traveling to Miami, and I'm like, I want to go get some great Cuban food, but I am obviously by myself. So here's what I do. I'm going to go out and I bring my plethora of weapons usually I'm in like a midriff top, because my outfit of choice is usually ripped jeans, and when I'm not in business, pencil skirts.
So what I love that you do with your company is you have a membership program where you support people, where they can join as a member, and you're creating this community. For one, they can go on the range and shoot. For one, you're providing them the regular updates and tips around protecting themselves. If somebody wanted to learn more about what you do to join your community, give a glimpse of it and where they can find you.
I'd say the best part, if you wanted to be the consumer of those kind of products, it's probably the best place to go. But if you wanted to, because I do speaking engagements and I do a lot of consultative work, ValerieTroya.com is the place to go for those types of things. But I mean, I'm easy. Just find me on Instagram. I love to chat. I mean, I just want to help people. Ultimately, that's what I'm here.
So I love about you. You really want to help people, and you're doing it through your past stories, your experiences, and you're helping people protect themselves. I want to give you the opportunity to share whether you have your last advice or inspiration for anybody that's listening or watching today.
I think that life is really short, and if you wanted to do something to extend that time and make it the best version of those days you could have, be more aware of your surroundings. Show up the best way you can. I talked about this in my classes, like, can you be the reasonable person in a self-defense situation? It's incredibly important for a prosecutor to know, were you reasonable? How do you get to that point? Self-growth, personal development is crucially important when you're in how you show up in the world, in your business, in your relationships. You can diffuse a lot of what could be potentially issues with a person, a conflict with a person, by being a reasonable person. How do you get there? If you have things to work on, we all do. I have things to work on. I'm sure you do too.
We all do. I definitely do.
taking that accountability for yourself is a lot of what I talk about in personal safety. It helps me out in my business. It's the biggest lesson I learned was, how are you showing up today? Is it the best version of yourself?
I love that. I love that. I just want to acknowledge you for everything you're doing to make the world a better place, to protect people, and just your positive energy. It's been an honor just collaborating with you. Have you on the show. For you of you that are watching, listening, check out what she's doing. Share this with somebody that needs to hear about this, and go out there and create some great things in your life today. We'll see you guys later.